What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. Well, controversy hit Xbox over the weekend after a new report pointed towards not only just one, but maybe multiple games from Microsoft's back catalog going to other platforms, and the response online from the Xbox community was absolutely wild, but we'll go over that here today. Also, we are going to be talking about a certain game that is being delisted, and it's on a subscription service that's flown under the radar, but it's actually a pretty intriguing game, and unfortunately, this once again shows us the concerns being valid around a digital-only future, and we'll also be talking about a certain PC port from Sony that they're not exactly happy about because, well, it's coming from that Insomniac leak, and it looks like the community decided to take matters into their own hands. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure to hit that like button, helps out a ton, and if new here to the SpawnWave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And we're gonna start today with Nintendo New York, the store that's there, as they did make an announcement, and this apparently led immediately to Switch 2 speculation because Nintendo can say anything and people try to connect it to their unannounced system that we feel like is coming later on this year. Well, here's the tweet that's in question. They say, our gaming wall will be out of order the week of January 8th, 2024. So this week, while it undergoes renovations, all their interactives will continue to be available for gameplay during this time, which obviously means they're setting it up for Switch 2, and the announcement is coming in the next few days. Okay, is it possible? Sure, anything's possible. Is it likely? No. I feel like this is just regular maintenance to start out the year, as of course they still have games to push for the current Switch. So Princess Peach Showtime, maybe they want to set things up for a little marketing spot, like a push for that in the store. Maybe they want to do something for Luigi's Mansion or Paper Mario, or just make more room around the interactives or on this wall for, I don't know, merchandise and sales, considering they are a store. So this to me looks pretty straightforward. Really not much to see here, I guess you can say. And we'll keep an eye on Nintendo themselves when they're ready to make that Switch 2 announcement. Not necessarily read between the lines for employees at the store, just kind of setting things up one day. Also, it looks like we have some good news for Spyro fans who are holding out hope that there would be a new Spyro game here soon. We can see this posted up over on their official Twitter account, saying 2024 motto, and we have a card here with Spyro saying, you gotta believe. Okay, so I see people in the comments saying that they hope they're not getting people's hopes and dreams up with this one. I feel like they know what they're doing, and yes, I believe there is a new Spyro game coming. I'm wondering how they would announce it, because now technically Activision Blizzard, of course, being under Microsoft, they could be at a developer direct. They could be at like their big summer showcase or an XO event. So there are a lot of possibilities as to how they could present this. But after the sales for the Spyro Reignited trilogy, which were very, very good, I feel like a follow-up would logically be a new game in the series, kind of like what happened with the Crash Insane trilogy doing well, and then we got a brand new Crash Bandicoot game. So I guess look forward to an announcement sometime this year. And in fact, I think that's a game that would be announced and then come out pretty quickly following that, maybe months later. Oh, and we know, of course, after last year when Phil Spencer showed up at the Square Enix Final Fantasy Fan Fest event, that Final Fantasy XIV would be making the jump to Xbox this year. And now we're starting to hear some likely dates as to when the beta will go live. In fact, we can see this was posted up by Genki, who did view what looks like the stream for Fan Festival 2024, and translated it. They are planning to begin the open beta around February 21st, but plans could still change, and then we'll look towards them, I guess, launching Final Fantasy XIV in like the first half of this year on Xbox, which they're gonna do a whole thing where you can play like a large chunk of the game for free up to like level 70 something. I still look at this game like, I don't know, do I have the time to play it? I know many of you out there who do say it is an incredible MMO to experience, but it's just, I see the amount of time you have to dump into that and basically ignore other games around you. So maybe I'll just try it out on the Xbox just for curiosity's sake and see if it grabs me there. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with Xbox, because there was quite the conversation going on around the hardware from Microsoft that people are wondering how really invested they are in it, especially with some of the reports going around right now that have just continued to build over the last 48 hours. Well, I do have good news, which we'll start with, as it does appear that there is a developer direct slated for the next 10 days or so. We're going to see this thing get announced maybe by the end of this week, heading into next week, as we can see this posted up over on Insider Gaming. And it originally appeared on actually Reddit, where this is from Xantorn, who's, they mentioned, been accurate in revealing showcase events in the past, claims that the next Xbox Direct will happen during the week of January 14th. So they can't speak on the shadow drop rumors, but the date has now been set in stone. And, well, okay, so if that happened that week, it'll likely be sometime between the 15th and the 19th, as those are the weekdays for that event. Makes sense. But it does appear that Insider Gaming is actually backing this up, not necessarily the exact time or date, as they're still kind of looking into that, but that they understand an event is scheduled to take place within the next couple of weeks. And yeah, so right now, that's kind of the way I think Microsoft will be operating here, are with these developer directs. Worked really, really well, even with the shadow drop of Hi-Fi Rush, and I feel like this is a good way to just kind of keep people updated by going to the studios themselves and letting the people making these games talk directly to the gamers. So I think the big thing they need to do here, though, is get that Hellblade 2 date locked in, have it presented, and then we can have that hopefully come out in the first half of this year to kind of set the tone, I'll say, for Microsoft heading into 2024, because I think Hellblade 2 is going to do really well with reviewers and just overall interest online. Outside of that, though, it's anyone's guess, as Microsoft they do have a lot of studios to pull from that they can put up there in the developer direct, maybe even have a shadow drop or two, and I think maybe they can bring in Activision Blizzard and sort of introduce them formally, and maybe talk about their backwards compatibility program and say, hey, yeah, some of those Activision Blizzard games that you guys have been looking through and talking about bringing to the platform now with Game Pass, those are going to start happening over the course of the next year or two, and here's 4 or 5 of them we're going to drop in today. I think that's a way to get things moving, a lot of excitement around that acquisition that cost them about $70 billion. But the thing that really caused a lot of conversation over the weekend had to do with Nate the Hate, who mentioned on his podcast that Microsoft appeared to be moving one of their more critically acclaimed games that was even in the Game of the Year conversation the year that it released over to other platforms. Now, it's important to note Nate didn't mention which platform, so sure, technically it could be going to Luna, but I think most of us are assuming it's either the Nintendo Switch or the PlayStation 5, or both, right? They could just drop it on there and say, hey, it's on all these platforms, go ahead and pick it up. Now, people are throwing their best guesses out there. I believe it's Hi-Fi Rush, and that seems to be what many people are saying. It just makes a lot of sense. The game itself, critically acclaimed, people really, really enjoyed their time with it, and let's face it, that's a game that would probably sell incredibly well on the Switch. But to follow this report up from Nate, Windows Central also had an article diving into this bit further, and we can see this posted up over on their website, with Jez Corden saying it has been suggested from very trusted, proven sources that Microsoft has been exploring bringing some of its back catalog to other platforms, although some of the details remain vague and unconfirmed. They've reached out to Microsoft to comment and clarify its position on this stuff, and I'm sure Microsoft will be real excited to talk about all the games they're bringing to Switch or PlayStation. The big talking point now that's come up is kind of questioning Microsoft's commitment to the Xbox hardware itself, the platform that really is where you would put a lot of titles exclusively to get people excited and interested in the ecosystem. But as I mentioned before, Microsoft's platform that they really are committed to is Game Pass, and it's not tied just to the Xbox. It's on PC. I mean, we're seeing it streamed on phones and TVs, right? And obviously it's on the Xbox there too, but it being widely available means that Microsoft is still trying to pull people in outside of just that Xbox hardware, which if they can get a game like a Hi-Fi Rush or some back catalog games that people seem very, very interested in and has seen high praise in the past, to just get people like looking at this, oh, okay, this is an Xbox game. Where do I go now to get the sequel? I go to the Xbox, or I just go to Game Pass on my PC. I kind of feel like that's Microsoft's play right now, because I don't think Starfield, for example, Forza Motorsport, Halo are just going to all of a sudden show up on PlayStation or Switch, but some of these smaller games will say that they think could at least pull some interest on other platforms. They might explore the idea of those being multi-platform. But I do understand some of the concerns from, we'll say, Xbox fans or people who have invested heavily in the hardware, because it does kind of seem like Microsoft is looking elsewhere at times and taking some of the spotlight off of really what they've built the entire brand around, that being the console itself. Next up, let's talk about a game that's being delisted from Apple Arcade. And this is a game that I actually played and talked about in my Apple Arcade video, so if you're curious to see more about not only the service, but this game in particular, you can check that video out. But this game is called World of Demons, and it's from PlatinumGames, which really caught me off guard when I was exploring that service, because it's Platinum and they made an Apple Arcade game. Well, to my understanding, the game was completely funded basically by that contract for Apple Arcade. So it's kind of this weird situation of, well, the game wouldn't have existed necessarily without Apple Arcade, but now it's being delisted. In fact, this was posted up over on the World of Demons blog on their website, where they say World of Demons will no longer be available to download on Apple Arcade as of January 18th, 2024. So, okay, 10 days from now, it's gone. Please see the schedule below for more details. We extend our gratitude to all players who have enjoyed the game since release. So if you're unaware, the way it works with Apple Arcade is you don't buy any of the games, you just subscribe to it and then you download the games outright then. But these games are not available purchasable otherwise, for the most part. I think there are a few exceptions, but this one, not the case. So when it's pulled off that subscription service, it's just gone. There's no more, oh, you can still re-download it. No. The game's just like snapped out of existence. And it's a shame because the game itself is actually pretty interesting. It uses the Okami sort of art style, which if you go back to the people from Platinum who kind of worked to make Okami back with what Capcom and Clover did, and then they move over to Platinum, it makes sense that maybe they were like, hey, let's use that art style for something that also plays more into a high-speed action RPG style game, which, again, not what I was expecting going into Apple Arcade, but it was a genuinely interesting and fun game to play. Now, I am wondering if maybe this is leading into the idea of it just being ported elsewhere. Maybe their contract has run up for Apple Arcade and it'll reemerge on all other platforms. We'll get a physical copy on the Xbox, the PlayStation, the Switch, and it just drops on all those digital storefronts. That, I think, is the best case scenario. The worst case scenario is it just never comes back and that's it. It's just gone. It's just blinked out of existence, and 5 years or so from now, we won't even remember that it was ever around, unless you, again, have it in a video, as I have like 3 or 4 minutes of just footage of me playing it. So I guess if you're curious about it, you got 10 days to check it out on Apple Arcade. And if you're someone who owns an Apple product, you may have a free trial just for Apple Arcade now for a month or two. So I guess activate it. You can hook up an Xbox or a PlayStation controller and check out World of Demons before it's gone in about 10 days. Next up, let's talk about a project that I'm sure Sony is just not at all excited around, and that's Spider-Man 2 on PC. Now, we already know, yeah, okay, Spider-Man 2 will eventually go to PC on Steam, and Sony has been doing this with a bunch of their first-party PlayStation games. After so long, maybe a year or two, they move it over and basically try to get people to double dip or buy it for the first time on PC, but they're able to sell the game essentially twice. Well, it appears that the modding community is not going to wait long. They're taking matters in their own hands. And I can't show you any of the footage or images going around right now. I can show you the trailer for Spider-Man 2, but this is stuff out of the Insomniac leak, of course, that took place. And basically, they have the code, and they're able to just sort of port this over to PC, and they're to a point now where it's running at 60 frames per second. They've been able to work out a lot of the texture glitches and bugs where, well, you're swinging through New York and there's textures on nothing other than maybe the character itself. It was pretty wild looking online, but now they're getting to a point where it's coming together, actually. And I don't know how this is going to go down, because I feel like if they try to distribute this game, it just immediately gets hit with cease and desist by Sony, or maybe even some sort of a criminal action. Because again, these are files that are stolen, and if you're taking them and manipulating and modding and doing all kinds of stuff to it to release a PC port, which is something that Sony wants to do in the future anyway, you can claim damages or all kinds of issues there. So for somebody working on this, I'd be kind of careful with it. It's It's the way it goes. If the internet gets their hands on something like this and they think they can get it done way before Sony or any big company, they'll try it. We've had this multiple times in the past. I think at one point Take-Two was pulling down a Red Dead Redemption mod where they were trying to recreate that game. So if this Spider-Man 2 port gets to a position where it's able to be distributed and can actually be played on PC in general, yeah, I think Sony will take some action and try to stop Spider-Man 2 getting out there 1, maybe 2 years earlier than they were hoping. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about that PlayStation 4 Pro system, as I think that's going to become more of a talking point as we go towards the end of 2024, since we're sort of expecting a PlayStation 5 Pro, and really the PS4 Pro is the only other instance, the only other time Sony has done a mid-gen refresh in that sense, where they just made it more powerful, not necessarily just slimmer. Well, we have some numbers now that did come out of that Insomniac leak, and people have been compiling and putting this together. For example, we can see this. This is over on Xputer. It says, as per the leaked Insomniac Games data, the PlayStation 4 Pro has allegedly sold 14.3 million units as of January 2020. I think it's fair to say that around that time, you're probably not seeing as many get out there, considering we were looking towards the PlayStation 5 at the end of 2020. But still, 14.3 million units. And people will look at that in regard to the overall sales of the PS4 and go, okay, well, that's 15% of the overall sales, 13%. But you have to remember, the PS4 Pro came out in 2016, so the PS4 base model was just under 50 million units sold at that time. If you then take the 14.3 and put it up against the PS4, which would have been another 65 to 70 million systems selling, that's actually not as bad then. It's about what I expect from the PS4 Pro, which again, that mid-gen refresh that people still gravitated more towards the cheaper system that was able to play the same games. I kind of feel like that's about what we're going to see out of the PS5 Pro, especially if the price point comes in at like $550 or $600. It gets harder and harder to justify that kind of price point when it's like it does 4K, but better. For enthusiasts or like myself, who I want to get a better experience out of my games, it's something I'm obviously going to pick up here for the channel. But for a lot of people in the mainstream who feel like the PS5 is good enough, they'll probably pass on it. But maybe a 10 to 15% cut of the install base for the PS5 Pro seems like that's maybe even what Sony would expect after some of these PS4 Pro numbers got out there. And before we go to the comment of the day, we're taking a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, which is Game of the Year Madness. It is the finale. It's The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom versus Baldur's Gate 3, which you can see some of the early voting for it right now, with Zelda ahead pretty handily. I mean, it's 64% to 36% at the time of this recording. And I think I'm going to leave this up for most of the week, actually, because I just want to get as many votes in. We can have the crown the winner here, which again, right now, Zelda is pulling out in front. With Baldur's Gate 3, though, it was behind RE4 for a little while and then ended up pulling out in front of RE4. So if you haven't voted, it's up right now on the community page. You can drop your vote in, and we'll see what happens by the end of this week, who takes the crown for Game of the Year Madness winner. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day, as you're seeing here. This is from Dora, who says, I do believe VR is the future, but not the present. You know, I feel like we've said this for a long time now with VR, that like we're thinking, okay, someday virtual reality will catch on. But it's been a while that we've just been saying that over and over and over again. Kind of reminds me a bit of 3D TVs, where we were looking at like, you know, maybe not yet, but someday 3D TVs will be the future. And then they just kind of went away. While VR seems to have more backing from big companies like Meta and even Sony, technically, I don't really see it yet with where we are for the technology, because even the all-in-one headsets, they're still bulky and it's just inconvenient. Maybe we get to a position where it's not only glasses, but even contact lenses, or who knows, maybe just a holodeck you can put in your house. Then I'll say, you know what? Okay, maybe this is the future. And then people will just never leave their house and it'll be like Ready Player One. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. Whether it's the controversy around Xbox right now, with Microsoft reportedly looking to move some of their exclusive titles to other platforms, do you think that's a good idea, or is that a mistake by Microsoft? And then also, what about World of Demons now being delisted for Apple Arcade? Let me know if you've had a chance to play that game and what your thoughts are around a subscription service like that, basically just erasing it completely. Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.